The sun had barely risen over the red-gold cliffs of the Arizona Territory when 3 Apache women, Nayeli, Tala, and Sani, came upon the wounded rancher whose arrival would collide with their destinies and the ancient laws of their people, altering the course of all 4 lives in ways none could have foreseen, for he lay half buried under sagebrush and dust, his shirt torn, his side bleeding from a grazing bullet wound, and his eyes half open in delirium as he whispered names the women did not understand. Yet the moment Nayeli knelt to examine him, she recognized the signs of conflict nearby: hoofprints, shell casings, and tracks that suggested someone had dragged the injured man to where he lay in the open. Because to leave a wounded enemy or stranger exposed to the desert was something no Apache warrior or woman of honor would do, and so the 3 lifted him with effort, carried him back to their secluded canyon dwelling, and tended his injuries with herbs, clean water, and the quiet endurance that came from generations of survival in a harsh land, while over the next days the man, who introduced himself as Daniel Hayes, a rancher from the borderlands who had been ambushed by rustlers, recovered slowly, waking to realize that the women who saved him belonged to a small but traditionalist Apache band led by Tala's aging father and governed by ancient codes meant to protect their people from vulnerability and dishonor. And soon Daniel learned one code in particular, spoken solemnly by Sani as she ground herbs beside him. Any outsider whose life was preserved through the combined aid of 3 unwed women became, by sacred customary law, their shared husband, bound not by force but by the repayment of protection and unity, a rule that had once prevented outsiders from taking advantage of the community's generosity or leaving young women unprotected in a dangerous land, but now, in this unexpectedly modern moment, placed Daniel at the center of a decision none of them had ever imagined facing. For Nayeli viewed the law as tradition to be honored, Tala saw it as a relic of a time when alliances were forged from necessity, and Sani, the most reserved, believed that choice mattered more than customs from centuries past. Yet all 3 acknowledged that their rescue of Daniel had set events in motion, and Daniel himself, still weary but lucid, found the notion baffling and overwhelming, for he had lived simply, raising cattle and mending fences, not navigating sacred commitments with 3 women of a people he deeply respected but barely understood, and though he insisted he would abide by their customs if they wished, he also assured them that he would never demand a place among them, nor accept one if it brought them sorrow or dishonor. Thus the days stretched into weeks as he regained his strength, helping to gather wood, tend the horses, and repair the corral that windstorms had damaged, and in those quiet days he learned more about each woman: Nayeli's fierce independence and talent with medicine, Tala's sharp mind and laughter that softened even her stern facade, and Sani's quiet wisdom, spoken not through long speeches but through precise, gentle truths that lingered long after she said them. And he came to understand that the bond forming among them was not one of obligation but of shared survival, mutual respect, and the slow weaving of trust, for the women saw in Daniel an honesty rare among outsiders, someone who listened rather than imposed, learned rather than dismissed. And one evening, as the 4 sat around the fire while the desert wind murmured through the canyon walls, Tala's father finally addressed the matter directly, stating in a firm but not unkind voice that the law existed to protect, not to chain, and that given the changing times, the 4 must decide together whether the bond would be formalized or released, for the strength of any union came not from tradition alone but from willingness. And so, under the soft glow of moonlight, Daniel declared that while he owed them his life, he wished only to honor their wishes, while Nayeli admitted that she no longer saw him as a stranger but as someone whose presence brought steadiness to their days. Tala confessed that she had come to admire his patience and quiet courage, and Sani, after a long silence, revealed that though she had feared the law would rob her of choice, she had discovered instead that choice had been growing ever since the day they rescued him. And in that moment, they agreed, not because an old rule demanded it, but because they had built something real in the crucible of danger and healing. That they would share a life together at the ranch Daniel hoped to rebuild, a place where the 3 Apache women could shape their own futures and where he would honor their customs, their strength, and their autonomy. And so, with the blessings of the elders, they returned to Daniel's land, rebuilt the ranch with collective effort, and forged a new kind of family, one rooted not in ancient law alone, but in hard work, trust, mutual respect, and the unexpected love that can rise from the dust of the desert when people choose one another freely despite every obstacle the world has placed before them.